This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. And by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPad and iPhone, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPad and iPhone, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm pleased to have two great guests tonight, maybe three if the third member of our panel shows up a little late, to discuss Apple Music, Taylor Swift, royalties, and everything surrounding this mess. It's probably been talked to death, but as we record this today, there have been a couple new developments. I don't know what will happen by the time you listen to this, but I have some very strong feelings about this, so we're going to get it out and let the other members of the panel straighten me out. So with that, let's find out who's here to talk to us. First up, Mr. Neal Pann. Neal, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I really appreciate it. As you said, my name is Neal Pann. I'm an architect, actually, and also am the co-host of the Archispeak podcast at archispeakpodcast.com, and I also run a website called Apple for Architects at appleforarchitects.com. So talk about Apple-related information and tips and tricks related to how it relates to architecture. So, and I'm also on Twitter at npan.com. Or NPAN. You can find me there.
And Neal, I'm so glad you're here because there's nobody that knows music like an architect.
That's right. Exactly.
So
you have to have something on in the background while I'm working.
You're the perfect member of this panel. Second, the guy who challenged me for the most, as Allison Sheridan said, the most garish shirt at MacStock.
And won.
Mr. Geisel, I don't know about that guy.
That shirt was hideously red.
Oh, it was fantastically red, but I had a pretty bold pink on, so.
Well, that's true. That's true. We would have to leave it up to the attendees to figure out. As Chuck said, my name is Guy Searle. I am one of the co-hosts, along with Gaz Mass, of the mighty, MyMac.com podcast. Been going since 2004. We didn't start it, but chances are Gaz and I will finish it. We have a really good time each week. I like to think of the show as the tech podcast for people that don't like tech podcasts. Everyone should have a pretty good time with it. I am also the author of a relatively short book, won't take long to read, and will put money in my pocket, called The Maltese Cube. You can find it on Amazon. It's there as either Kindle or the Dead Tree version.
What is the Maltese Cube about?
It's kind of a ripoff of the Maltese Falcon, but with a lot of the shenanigans of the G4 Mac Cube thrown in. A lot, and I throw in lots of sort of real people, though I changed names a little bit to keep myself out of the courthouses. So there's people, of course, like our hero whose name is Macintosh. How clever is that? Also, Michael Spindler and Jean-Louis Gasly. They're two of the bad guys. Oh, it's just a blast. And won't break the bank and won't break your brain.
Sounds like only something that you could author.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Good. Okay. Well, I'll make sure we have links in the show notes to it. So, folks, if you're intrigued, like I just became, go and check it out.
I had copies at MacStock, Chuck. I would have given you one.
Well, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was about. I just thought it was something you were trying to sign and get phone numbers, or I don't know.
Well, no, I'm a married man. I don't do those things.
Okay. On that note,
Better leave it there, Chuck.
Moving on. He's trying to stay out of the courthouses. I'm trying to stay off the witness stand. So that's good. Guys, I'm going to try to boil this down a little bit, and I'll start it off, and then seriously, you guys can tell me where I'm wrong. But Apple offers 3 months of Apple Music free. There's a big kerfuffle over whether the artists are getting paid, and in fact, it looked like the artists weren't, because Apple allegedly negotiated a deal with the record companies to pay a couple points more in royalty after the fact, after the 3 months were over, as I understand it. Then Taylor Swift comes on the scene and says that the artist should get paid, and this is not something that is really fair. They shouldn't be asked to support the Apple system. And so Apple renegotiates, or that's one way of saying it. They cave in another way of saying it. And now today, as we record this, it comes out that Apple appears to be paying, well, two things happened, I believe, reported today. Number one, Apple's negotiated a last-minute deal with the independent labels so that their artists will be paid at a rate that is about equal to what Spotify pays for non-subscription plays. And that appeared to trigger the announcement that Apple is paying basically 2 cents per play to the established record companies as well. That's the way I understand it. Does that sound about right, or have I missed something?
I haven't heard most of that. I thought that the amount that Apple was paying the labels had not been established, or hasn't been made public knowledge.
Well, I think that just happened today, and again, as we record this, relatively late in the day, guys. So maybe you haven't had a chance to see it. But that was John Gruber commented on it on Daring Fireball, and I've seen it a couple places. So I think it seems to be pretty well established. Neal, anything you heard that you didn't like in my summary?
No, it all sounded about right. We can all squabble over tenths of a point or tenths of a percent, or they're getting, how much they're getting. We may never really know. And to me, that's kind of irrelevant. The fact that they are getting something, I think, is important. I think the artists should be getting paid. It's nice that Apple has the money to pay them. That they can do this while they're technically not making any money. And so I think that's nice that Apple can do that. Artists should get paid. How much they get paid, I think we can all argue about. But the fact that they are getting paid, I think it's difficult for the independent artist to make any money, or not, when they're not making money over that 3-month period. That's going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt the Taylor Swifts or the U2s in the world. But the rest of the bands will benefit from this, and that's good. It's nice that Apple can afford to do it. I think if we were talking about this 10 years ago, in 2005 or 2003, when iTunes was first starting, say, in theory, if Apple was doing a streaming music service 10 years ago, I don't think Apple could afford to have done this. Also, too, I think one of the interesting points about this, that how quickly Apple turned on this information. Taylor Swift came out with her letter Sunday morning or something a week ago, and then that afternoon or that early evening, Eddie Q's making tweets about, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. I have to think that there was very hard discussions about whether or not they were going to do this right from the very beginning. And we don't really know why they chose not to. But I have the feeling that they had discussed this before. There's no way Apple just turns this around in a couple of hours on a Sunday afternoon. This had to have been discussed prior.
I actually kind of follow the conspiracy theory on this.
What's the conspiracy theory?
The conspiracy theory is basically looking for good publicity, whereas because we don't really know what Apple negotiated with the major labels or even with the independent labels, but to have come out and said, and there was really no reason for them to say it at all, or for anybody to say anything about it, that none of the artists were supposed to be paid during this free period. And then Taylor Swift on a Sunday morning says, "Well, that's not right, Apple." It would, however she phrased it in her letter, and then not even 12 hours later, all of a sudden, Apple on a Sunday just turns that around and says, "Oh, well, we're going to pay them after all." I'm sorry, that just sounds like smacking of, well, oh, look at the wonderful thing Apple has done here. They're taking money out of their own pockets and they're going to give it to the artists. It's like, come on. And let's face it, it's not the artists that are making the money here. It's the labels. The
Right.
artists themselves, with almost every single one of these streaming services, make very little money. And and honestly, I would love to say, well, the artists should be getting paid and the artists should be the ones getting this money. But when you get right down to the brass tacks of it, it was the artists that negotiated their contracts with the labels. So if they're not making a lot of money based on what they themselves signed, well, then who's to blame for that? It's certainly not Apple. Apple is just, not counting us as consumers. Apple is the end user providing this content to a hopefully vast audience. So, if the artists are getting screwed, it's really kind of their own fault. And I hate to say that because there's some really talented people out there that probably aren't being paid, bumpkiss for, all of this music that they have created that's going to go out onto Apple services. But you could say the same thing about any of the streaming services.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. I'm happy to welcome TunnelBear as a sponsor of Mac Voices. TunnelBear is a simple, attractive app that addresses one of those issues we all face as denizens of the 21st century: web surfing security. TunnelBear is an easy-to-use VPN with over 5 million users. What makes TunnelBear so great is that it's simple. With just a click to turn it on and turn it off, you can browse the internet in complete privacy, get around censorship, and unblock websites. So what's a VPN, I hear you ask? That's geek speak for a virtual private network. What it means is that what you send and what you receive is encrypted so it can't be seen by governments, ISPs, or anyone else, especially the bad guys. Most VPNs can be a challenge to set up and maintain. I've seen tutorials out there for the roll your own VPNs that promise in 14 steps your VPN might work. Right, 14 steps. With TunnelBear, you just install, click, and you're protected on public Wi-Fi or while traveling. And TunnelBear has apps for your Mac, your iPhone, your iPad, and even a Chrome browser extension. So one solution addresses all your web surfing privacy concerns. TunnelBear is affordable too, with a free option to get you started, and several tiers that will address how much secure web surfing you need. And in today's world, you need a lot. Find out just how easy web surfing security can be by visiting tunnelbear.com/MacVoices and downloading your very own TunnelBear right now. You'll be amazed at how simple and easy security can be. That's tunnelbear.com/MacVoices to try TunnelBear free and make your web surfing more secure. Welcome and thanks to TunnelBear as a sponsor of Mac Voices. This is going to be good because I have really strong feelings about what Neal said and about what Guy said. But before I get to those, I want to welcome the third member of our panel, Mr. Julio Ojeda-Zapata of the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Julio, it's great to have you. Yeah, good to have you. I assumed that you were pushing deadlines.
Yeah, very much so. I apologize that I'm late to join the show.
No problem. Give us a quick rundown on where folks find you and what's going on in your life that you want to promote.
I'm a tech writer at the Pioneer Press here in Minnesota. I've been doing that for a while. I also dabble a bit in freelance writing for the likes of Tidbits and Macworld. I'm enjoying the summer. Minnesota summers are extremely short. They last about a week, so I'm enjoying today. So
good. Well, I'm glad we caught you on your summer week. So.
Yeah. What do they actually still say? Stop the presses. That's what I want to know.
Well, the other day we had something very similar to that, where some new information for a story came to light. So we sort of digitally stopped the presses. So that was pretty close.
Good enough.
But you don't hear that grinding sound anymore.
Oh no.
So Julio, feel free to dive in here a little bit. But I guess my take on this is, first of all, that there were so many great things that both of you said. Apple negotiated. This is the part I don't quite understand. Number one, Apple negotiated with the record labels. The record labels have contracts with the artists. So therefore, the artists are being represented by the record labels. If the record labels made a deal that did not pay the artists, the record labels are the ones that should be blamed for this, not Apple. And that's where I really was a little bit upset with Taylor Swift. But to be fair, she has her own label. So, was she speaking on behalf of the artists, or was she speaking on behalf of the labels? Or what was this deal? That bothers me a lot. The second thing, Neal, what you said about Apple having money enough to pay this, that's the other thing that bothers me. It feels like it's one of those situations that just because they have this huge pile of cash that they're sitting on and everyone knows it, that they should be required to make these payments. And that bothers me a lot. We can debate whether or not they should make any payments. That's one thing. But one of the justifications seems to be that they have this cash. So, share it with the artists. And I have friends that are artists, and I have friends that make a living as artists. And so, I have nothing against having them get paid. But this idea that people were going around the contracts when Apple was negotiating, and I assume negotiating in good faith, and they gave up something. They gave up a couple points on the back end of royalty to try to get those 3 free months. At least that's the way it's been reported. How far out of line am I?
Well, if I'm understanding it correctly, you're feeling some outrage on Apple's behalf.
Well, I'm not sure outrage, but I feel like they're being unfairly treated, Julio.
Yeah, and I think you're correct, and I think Apple would agree with you that you're correct, and I suspect in meeting rooms at Apple campus there was some hot debate about this initially, about whether to do this way, and some more debate about how to proceed right now. And I think what it really boils down to is that there's this eye of Sauron that suddenly swung around and pointed straight at Apple, and Apple sort of became the bad guy, and Apple just basically wants this to go away, and they're kind of throwing some money at it to make it go away. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's fair or unfair, they just suddenly found themselves being portrayed in a very bad light. If Taylor Swift publicly says you are bad, that's not a very good thing for somebody even as an entity as large and influential as Apple. So they just wanted this to go away. And they did it a big 180 and made it go away. And now they Apple and Taylor Swift are singing sweet music together, and everybody's happy, and we're all going to sort of go dance into the meadow, and everything's fine.
I think Julio's got a good point there. Apple's launching this major service, something that has a lot of competition with Spotify and Tidal and other streaming services out there. They're late to the game here, so they don't really need this bad press. And if they had fought this all week long, I think it would have been exactly as Julio said. It would have been bad news, and that would have captivated the news cycle all week long. And then here they are launching this thing to, Apple's being bad. They're not paying the artists. Well, I'm not going to sign up for that. So throw some money at it. Problem goes away. And as Julio just said, Taylor Swift announced today her new album, her album that came out last year, is going to be available. So yay, everybody's happy. And there's good news leading into next week's launch.
And I think the other point I want to make is that there seems to be some underlying assumptions among the Apple faithful that when this music service comes out, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a hit. It's gonna be wonderful. And I think it's dangerous to make that assumption because Apple initially with iTunes and so forth was very dominant, very influential. It's somewhat of an underdog now with so many other services available, and it's not a given that this thing is going to be hugely successful or even mildly successful. I give you Tidal, and Apple does not want to risk anything. It wants to make sure everything is going to go as smoothly as possible, and this was a big problem that could have irreparably harmed the service that's just about to launch, and it definitely does not want that because, again, to assume that this thing is going to be a huge success, it's not a given, and everything needs to go Apple's way, and Apple had the ability to control this, to fix this, to throw some money at it, and it did it, and that does not surprise me in the least.
Well, I'm sure it'll go just as well as iCloud did.
Hopefully a little better.
You mean Mobile Me, maybe? Maybe
yeah,
Mobile Me.
.Mac? How far back you want to go?
iTools.
Ooh.
I give you ping.
Yeah. Guy,
Yeah.
Julio's comment about Eye of Sauron certainly casts Taylor Swift in a certain light. I'm not sure that I'm quite ready to go, with that, but I do feel it find it a bit disingenuous that she says she's speaking up on behalf of the artist, but she's a label, and so that bothers me just a little.
Well, I mean, the thing that her whole fan base, which, as I understand it, are called Swifties. That is disturbing all by itself. But putting that aside,
as a Tom Swift fan, as a kid, I'm very offended by this.
another Tom Swift
social justice warrior. That's what we'll become.
Oh man.
Yeah, does not even go in that direction. The problem is Taylor Swift can't speak for all the artists or all the independent artists because of the level of success that she's had. She is on such a different plateau from so many of these other groups that are just starting out or have struggled for years to try to get a little bit of recognition, that the fact that she's going to come out and say, well, I'm fighting for all of you, as she, sips a martini by her pool or whatever, it does strike me as slightly disingenuous. And I really can't see how she can claim to speak for the artists. But however it started and however it worked out, whether it was prearranged for new publicity for Ms. Swift's album that came out last year, which I understand Apple's service is going to be the only one that actually has it as far as the streaming service goes. This all kind of falls back into what I was talking about before. How much of this, just to generate publicity for this new service, could have been prearranged? And the fact that this all happened on a Sunday. I just can't see, Tim Cook and Eddie Q and all the various bigwigs at Apple sitting around their homes waiting for that phone call, or, suddenly, Taylor Swift comes out and says something, and then all of the bigwigs at Apple just drop whatever the heck they're doing on a Sunday to talk to each other about the music service. I don't buy that. I think this is a huge publicity stunt.
I think it's a fair possibility, and I'm glad you raised it, because that's one thing I did leave out of the summary, because I don't quite subscribe to that. I don't think Eddie Q and Tim Cook have Sundays like you do, Guy.
No, probably not.
But that said,
but who could?
Yeah, but the rest of it, I'm kind of with you. And listen, if you're a Swiftie out there, please don't be upset.
Kill us.
Well, don't kill. If this was Lars Ulrich of Metallica, or Angus Young of AC/DC, or any of the bands that I particularly care for, if you've had that, Guy, you said it well. If they've had that level of success, it's the same thing that seems to be sinking Tidal. There's super successful artists up there saying, "Oh, we're taking care of you. We're taking care of you." Just doesn't quite ring.
Yeah, and almost all the big names on Tidal all have their own labels. So they don't have to do any kind of split other than a distribution split with whatever parent label that their stuff is on. So they're pulling in most of the money. What their split is going to be with other independent artists, I don't think even Tidal has said. I do think it's interesting that the service is barely launched and their CEO quit. Really?
Second CEO.
Second CEO. Yeah.
Oh, second CEO.
They fired the first one 3 months ago.
Okay. Well, that bodes well for the future of Tidal. There's a lot of these services that are now starting to take root, and just like we had with personal computers, just like we had with portable music players, eventually there's going to be a shakeout. There's going to be a fallout. Some of these companies that people are gushing about right now are going to disappear. That's just the way that, it really depends on how long or how deep the pockets are of some of these services while they try to get established.
And the one player that people sometimes don't mention or even think about is Google. Google has a awkwardly named, but I think very effective approach to music. They recently made some improvements where they have these free themed streaming channels. I've been playing with them. They're a result of the Songs acquisition, and I've been playing with them. I'm a big Google head. I think Apple is incompetent where web services and so forth are concerned. Google is the expert in that regard, and so in terms of web offerings, I've thrown my lot in almost completely with Google, and that includes their music service. It's very, very good. Apple is looking at that and saying, "Holy cow!" As we move forward, this is going to be a fearsome competitor. Some of these other guys who are sort of on their own, it's possible they may run out of money. Some of them might fall off the map. That's not going to happen to Google, and Google is very serious about music, and they're doing a very, very good job.
Well, what it really comes down to is who's the customer and who's the product. And I think with Google, that's very clear who the customer and who the product is. And that's fine. I use Google Docs. I use all kinds of Google services, but I never forget that I'm not the customer. I never forget that. So I'm very, very careful with what I use Google for.
Neal, you've been quiet all this time because you're the one that led off, and you seem to be kind of cheerleading of. I'm interpreting, so correct me.
Sure.
For Taylor's position and Apple's capitulation.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with everything that everybody said here so far.
You mean me?
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think that I don't know what Taylor Swift's motivations are, but to have somebody with a name step up and fight for independent artists, I think is a great thing. Because a few days before, we had heard rumblings of other independent either artists or smaller labels kind of complaining about this, but it really wasn't getting a lot of play. And until Taylor Swift comes out, somebody with some notoriety, a lot of pull, a lot of fans, it's not until she really makes a big stink out of it and makes a stand that Apple then changes their mind. So I think that whether or not she is motivated to help those smaller artists or to help herself, I don't really know, but it will help the smaller artists. It will help the smaller independent labels. So, hey, more power to her. She got something done. And now if she can solve world peace and everything else, would be okay. I love the meme
broccoli quiche.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I swear I'm not strip teasing here. I'm just taking a layer off because I'm kind of hot. So.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thanks for the warning, Julio.
Okay. All right. The camera now goes on to Julio. I was waiting to see a Taylor Swift T-shirt under there, Julio. I'm kind of disappointed. Neal, I hear what you're saying, and I guess if she had been able to be representing the independent artists, but I don't, as I recall, and I could be wrong, I don't remember that being her phrasing. It's just that the artists need to get paid. Yeah. And again, that dual position of having her own label and being an artist and being, definitely a high-powered artist and a powerful artist, that's great. I'm pleased that the independents are getting paid, especially because they're the ones least able to absorb this.
Well, rich people don't get rich by giving away their money, right? So if she really wanted to not give away her music for free, and that's her right, that's her right to say so, and her right to pull her music from that service if she wants to get paid, and it therefore benefits other smaller publishers, okay. But I think she has the right to do that. It's Apple's right to either take it or refuse it and move on.
Well,
but I think
that's exactly
Julio's
what she did, though.
The press is bad, and so I think they threw money at it to make it go away.
And
she pulled her music from both Pandora and Spotify.
Right.
Prior, right?
Right.
That wasn't just this weekend. She had already done that.
Right.
Julio?
And I'll expand on my earlier point. I'm fairly certain that Apple knew with a fair degree of certainty that the way it initially structured this was going to be controversial, and it probably had a pre-configured button. The minute this kind of hit the fan, they would boop, hit the button and retreat. I think the Apple people are very smart. I'm sure they saw this coming.
I think you're probably right about that. I mean, there were contingencies in place, and it was just a question of how far it would go. I don't know. I just the whole thing just still bothers me.
So Chuck, should Apple have caved? I mean, to use that language, should they have switched gears and said, "Okay, we're going to pay them," or should they just stood their ground?
I don't know. I mean, the fact that they didn't bring up. Well, I wanted to make keep me honest, Neal. The one other point that I wanted to make, though, Taylor has the right to pull her music.
Yes.
Because she's a label. Because I don't think that I've ever heard of any artist having in their contract the ability to pull their music off of something.
Metallica.
Metallica, okay. And I don't know if Metallica was a label at that time. But Metallica,
they didn't. And same thing with AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, quite a few bands. Of course, these are all very high profile, very very popular, either today or going back into the past bands. But the one thing that all of those bands had in common was none of them were on iTunes for a very very long time.
That's the one thing. We're talking about sales there, and then you move over to the streaming music services. And I guess there are a couple that are AC/DC. I don't think is on Spotify. I'm not sure about Metallica. So I don't know. I mean, maybe at a certain level you can negotiate to have those rights. I'm just wondering, how that
keep
plays
your
in.
artists happy. Keep your artists happy. That's the main job of the labels, is to make sure that the artists are happy enough so that they don't look for a new label. Especially the big names, or I should say exclusively the big names, because the smaller bands, they don't give a crap. If some small band that has a slight bit of success suddenly says, well, you know what, we don't like the way our contract is structured and we want to renegotiate it, or we're going to go to another label. Well, if their sales are, say, sub 10,000 units, they'll just say, oh, okay, well, we'll just tear up this contract. Now you owe us for studio time. You owe us for engineering time. You owe us for all of these things that we spent to make your first or second or third or whatever album it was that had this small amount of success, basically leaving them with nothing. All the power currently, and almost going back to the beginning of time, has always been with the labels and the distributors. The artists themselves made most of their money through touring, and that hasn't changed. And until, let me back up a little bit. Something really interesting happened in the early 2000s, and that was the ability to produce digital audio became so much easier and so much cheaper. And then the distribution channels went from music stores. Anybody seen a music store in the last 4 or 5 years? To pretty much exclusively online, or the few odd sales of CDs or DVDs that you might get out of Amazon. But for everyone else in Joe Sixpack, the distribution channel is now digital. It's now online. So all of the costs of creating the music, all of the costs of distributing the music have gone away. The one thing that so far hasn't changed is the power of the labels over the artists. Well, now, 20 years ago, the closest analogy I can think of to Taylor Swift 20 years ago would be Madonna. She was like one of the first of her generation to say, okay, I am really, really successful, and you people need me more than I need you. This is the direction that, in my opinion, that music is going. This is what has the labels so afraid. They're losing their power over the artists. They know it, and they're hanging on by the skin of their teeth.
Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPad and iPhone, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPad and iPhone, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. If you work with PDF documents for business or just for yourself, then you need PDF Pen from Smile. PDF Pen gives you the power to edit and annotate your PDFs, run optical character recognition on them to turn them into editable text, and even export them to Microsoft Word. With the Pro version, you can export to Excel and PowerPoint, and that means you can also export to Apple's Pages, Numbers, and Keynote too. Smile just released yet another great update to PDF Pen, bringing it to version 7.1. Now you have new ways to control page numbering, including control over font, color, formatting, and page range. You also have new stamps to choose from, like paid, faxed, copied, and more. You can even create custom stamps that contain your name and the date the document was stamped. PDF Pen 7.1 also brings auto deskewing when performing optical character recognition, and that's a great thing because it improves the quality of the resulting scan, making it even more useful when you annotate it. And there's improved voiceover support in PDF forms as well as other fixes and improvements. All that on top of interactive PDF forms, integration with iCloud Drive, and a whole lot more. Want to learn how to use all these great features? Michael E. Cohen wrote the book on PDF Pen, literally. In Take Control of PDF Pen 7, you can learn all about the great new features and how to put them to work for you. You can find PDF Pen 7 and PDF Pen Pro 7 on the Mac App Store, or you can download demo versions and buy direct from Smile at smilesoftware.com. Find out just how much you can get done with your PDFs with PDF Pen from Smile. Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices. Neal, I want to answer your question. I do think I don't know that Apple should have caved. I think that somewhere there should have been consideration for these 3 months free to the artist. My understanding, however, is that consideration was there in the extra points after the 3 months were over. That there were going to be just a couple more points of I keep wanting to say commission. That's not right. Royalties paid, and so that's where I saw there was give and take, and everybody was winning.
So was it a marketing problem that Apple didn't market the idea that they were paying a couple of percentages or more, and they should have pushed that a little harder in the message, maybe?
Maybe so. I mean, I do remember seeing that. I don't know exactly when in the timing, but I thought that was part of the initial announcement, and it's just gotten so overlooked. And again, folks, I want to make real clear. I've read everything that you all have been reading, and trying to sort through and trying to pick up different pieces. So, if any of this is wrong, my apologies, and I think the group would agree. This is the way we understand it, and that's the way I understand it. And so, yeah, I think maybe if it had been pushed a little harder, the fact that it seems to have been overlooked by so much of the media and so much of the popular fan base as a business decision on Apple's part and on the label's part. That really bothers me.
Well, Chuck, your logic appears to be sound, but we left logic a long time ago. This is a public relations problem for Apple, and they just needed to fix it right away. They threw some money at it. End of story.
I like that approach,
yeah.
Julio. I like your reasoning because I want to win the battle, but they just want to make it go away and move on to fight bigger fights. So I'm with you.
I like conspiracies myself, but that's me.
Well, again, I don't think that's an impossibility. I mean, I've heard you come up with crazier things, Guy.
Yeah, recently.
Is there a verdict here, gentlemen? Do we have? I mean, Julio, I guess what I'm hearing you say is Apple made the right decision for whatever reason, just to make it go away. Guy, I guess I'm hearing you say you think it's a conspiracy theory that the whole thing was probably orchestrated. Neal, I'm not exactly sure which conclusion. I think you're happy the artists are getting paid, but I'm not sure why.
Well, the outcome that the artists are getting paid is the best conclusion. And whether it's a conspiracy or whether Apple caved or for whatever reason, if there is money going to the artists eventually through the labels during this free trial period of this new music service from Apple, I think that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if it's a problem that Apple just threw money at to make it go away as far as a PR problem, I'm okay with that. I think the bigger question, and Julio, you brought it up earlier, there's no guarantee that Apple Music is going to be a success. And I think that there's a big question there. And because the common theory is that Apple's no good with cloud services. And this is going to be another one. How successful will it be? I don't know. I'm not a huge music listener, but I am real curious to try this 3 months free to see how much I really use it, to see if it's going to be worth me ponying up $10 a month to pay for. I don't currently pay for any streaming music.
Nope.
So I'm really kind of curious to see if Apple Music will be something that I will use enough to justify that price.
Guy, I just heard you say nope, so I assume that means nope, you don't pay for any streaming music?
I've got somewhere in the neighborhood, and as for a collector, it's probably nothing. Somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 tracks in iTunes. My iTunes collection, including video, is encroaching on 3 terabytes. But yeah, typically, I mean, I've got a relatively short commute to work, which is where most of my time in my car is spent. And it's hard enough just trying to keep up with all the podcasts that I listen to, much less, let's find some new music. Yeah. So I will certainly give Apple Music a try and hope that I've got a couple of long drives at some point this summer that I usually do with the family. And, we'll see how it works out. The one thing that a lot of people I don't think are talking about in relation to this service is the radio station with the DJs, the Beats One, I think they're calling it.
Yeah,
Beats One. I'm kind of curious how that's going to shake out. Now, obviously, with what Apple knows about you and the music that you already have in iTunes through services like iTunes Match, they'll give you probably a pretty good mix of the type of music that you already want to listen to. But if you're talking about a DJ service similar to like a radio station, how exactly? I mean, how are these DJs going to know whoever's listening what type of music it is that they want to hear, or is it just going to be whatever the DJs feel like playing?
Right.
Well, they're going to have a variety of shows, each with different approaches. Different stars and famous DJs, and depending on the time slot, they're going to mix it up. But your point is, well, I'm scratching my head a little bit over this radio station idea, and I'm actually remembering, this was a very long time ago, I'm remembering Microsoft, just to make an analogy here, Microsoft, long ago, I was at the Pioneer Press, and Microsoft created a local news operation called Sidewalk in a variety of cities, including the Twin Cities. They were going to cover news and entertainment and so forth, and they actually stole some editors and reporters from the Pioneer Press, and they created this fancy newsroom. And Microsoft, the software company, was going to be in the news publishing business, for God's sake, and it was going to be great. And and 2 years later, it was gone. And
much like tablet computing,
that's the first thing I thought of when I heard about this. Apple, which makes computers, is going to have this radio station. It's the same. It creates the same level of puzzlement in me. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And to put this into context, I don't know if you think back to the WWDC music presentation, I dozed off about a third of the way through it, and so I'm still trying to wake up and fully understand all of this Apple Music stuff. It's very complicated, not very well articulated. I hesitate to say that Apple so far is kind of botching this whole thing, but they haven't really been on message the way they tend to be. They tend to be experts at conveying a concept, a product, a principle, and so forth. And they haven't done this very well this time around. And so this Taylor Swift business was kind of the last straw for them. I think there's a little bit of sweating, back at One Infinite Loop, and they're basically trying to get this right. And so far they've been scrambling a little bit. They've been fumbling. It doesn't seem to have been very well executed at all.
Yeah, but that jacket that Drake was wearing, kicking. It was kicking.
And you could buy one.
Yeah, for $10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Julio, I think that's interesting. I buy that Apple feels like music is in its DNA, as the phrase goes, because of iTunes. I think there's a lot going on there. I'm with you on the radio station thing, but I think today I've up to this point I've just understood it to be DJs playing, what's hot and whatever that means, and the evidence was kind of pointing toward pop music. Today we heard that Eminem is going to be one of the first interviews, and now there's something coming out about celebrity DJs, and I think Pharrell and who else was it? Drake. They're going to be celebrity DJs. I think this is all about Apple. I think this is Jimmy Iovine. I think this is Jimmy Iovine controlling, access to the Apple radio station with the record companies. And the one thing I'm not sure I agree with you on, I think this is going to be big. I don't know how big. I don't know how successful. I don't think they're going to fall on their face the way they have with some other things, Ping, because I just think it's too convenient. It's too easy. Every iDevice out there is going to automatically have access to this stuff right away. And that's going to be awfully, awfully seductive when you don't have to download an app. You don't have to figure out how to use it. It's just going to be there. Punch the button. They've already got your credit card. Sign up, and you're playing music.
Now, also remember your analogy about Microsoft creating its own news service. That was an area that Microsoft had absolutely no experience in whatsoever. But that Microsoft has had no experience in whatsoever. But Apple's been doing music since 2001. They do have a lot of experience with music, maybe not so much outside of delivering it through iTunes as far as getting content out there. But I think that Apple is going to do very well with this. And I don't think they expect it to be an overnight success. And I think that they'll take their time with it. I think that unlike something like Ping, they'll kind of, let it germinate a bit and see where it goes.
I think Apple
germinate, not germinates.
I think Apple did. I agree with Julio. It did fumble that message a little bit. I don't know. What do you guys think? When I watched the WWDC keynote, it almost seemed like the music portion should have been like a separate keynote. That should have been a separate announcement, a separate press event. It just didn't seem to fit.
Apple used to have music events.
Well, they used to have music events, and they could have had maybe another one. But I think the launch of this didn't seem to mesh. Maybe scheduling-wise, this was approaching and was going to happen right around the same time. So they thought, well, let's cram it into this event instead of calling out the press twice. Within 2 weeks, but they've done that before, right?
Many times.
They've had several events almost 2 weeks apart, 2 or 3 times in the fall, not necessarily in the spring or early summer. But
what I think happened was
strange.
What I think happened was they were going to do some Apple TV stuff, and that at the last minute kind of fell off the map, so they had to like fill. So
yeah, but they filled too much, didn't they? I mean.
See, Neal, I'm with you. To a point, I don't think that it was as tacked on as it looked. I think with the Apple TV HomeKit, all of that stuff, if that had been truly ready, I think it would have all flowed a lot easier. I think there was a disconnect right there, but they had to go. They had to and wanted to go ahead with it to get it out there. Pardon me, for the last part of the summer, to do the 3 months. So I that's pure speculation, but I just think that if you'd been able to talk about a device that you could walk in and be playing something on your iPhone, and all of a sudden it's coming through your home speakers through your Apple TV or through AirPlay, that would have been spectacular. And it still probably will happen. It's just it didn't feel as smooth as we're used to Apple being.
Right. Yeah. Well, I definitely think that. Part of it seemed like there was a lot of confusion, at least on my part. What is Apple Music? I mean, I guess it's the streaming service. No, it's the radio station. No, it's the Connect. It's, iTunes Matches over here. That's something separate. No, we'll still have that. I don't know. I don't know if it was just the way the keynote flowed, but or I was too tired after 2 hours of other stuff. But it just seemed like it seems a little confusing, and that goes to what you were saying, Julio. I don't know if they'd really botched it, but the message didn't seem quite clear, and maybe it was just because of the way the presentation went. But it seemed a little confusing to me, and it still is. And maybe once we get the app next Tuesday and we can start using it, it'll all be very clear. But at least via the presentation at WWDC, it seemed a little confusing to me.
And I'll bring up Google again. The Google thing is very simple. Google says, here's all this, upload all your music for free forever. Put it over here. And oh, by the way, if you throw a few dollars our way, we'll also stream some more music for you. And then we have these little radio station things. It's very simple, very easy to understand. And I'm still just like you, struggling to understand this Apple Music thing. It's just, I can't utter the words Apple Music and instantly understand what it is. I'm still struggling with that quite a bit.
Julio, clarify that for me. I can take all my music now, upload it to Google, stream it back down to myself through any of my devices, and I don't have to subscribe to the music service?
Yeah, if you can upload your music for free without paying anything. And this was rolled out a few years ago, and they only gave me enough space for about 85% of my music collection. That 15% was always bugging me, but they recently, I think, doubled or tripled the space. So now I have more than enough music for, I think I have 25,000 tracks in my music collection. And you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to pay for the storage. You don't have to pay for the privilege of using that storage. The paid streaming service, a la Apple Music or Spotify or Rdio, you have the option of paying for that, but you don't have to. Okay. It's great. It's fantastic. It's a concept executed very simply, very easy to understand. The way Apple does it, this whole iTunes Match thing, it's just more complicated. The average person has to sort of struggle to understand it. It's just Google just says, here's a bucket, throw your music in there, keep it there forever, end of story. Very simple.
Well, I think the difference is that Apple doesn't expect you to upload your entire music library. They can just look at your iTunes library and say, okay, you have this song, this song, this song, this song, and this song, and we will, because you have either paid for those or you've brought them in through CDs or however you got them. We're going to match those with 256K AAC versions of those that we have in our library and send them back to you when you want them. I mean, that's kind of what iTunes Match does.
I guess I didn't understand, or I take that back. Back when I looked at the Google Music service, I had the same problem you did, Julio. I wasn't being given enough room for everything, and therefore I didn't want to try to pick and choose and upload and delete and move something around, and so I just said the heck with it. So if they've doubled or tripled the space and now you can put everything up there, that does make it compelling. Guy, I know what you're going to say. I'm the product, not the customer, but it still makes it compelling.
And
sure.
Guy, your point is that this obviously doesn't make any sense because it's just information, music information. So you're not really uploading your music and storing it. That's not actually happening. So why are they setting these arbitrary, number of tracks limits? So in a way, if you really think about it logically, it doesn't make any sense. But setting that aside, my point is the Google Music message is articulated more competently, more clearly. And it makes more sense to me, and it's much more compelling than anything Apple has done in music in years. So,
well, we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit my mic. Google has a tendency to have a lot of splashy rollouts on new services, and then if it doesn't quite work out the way they thought it was going to, they just kind of disappear. Apple, on the other hand, has done similar things. Ping is a great example of that. But they seem to take a longer term view than most other tech companies, which is something that I find very attractive in a tech company.
I kind of, if you tally up the score on either side, I think it kind of works out the same. So I'm not sure I really agree with you, but I see your point.
I definitely think that when Apple bought Beats, they all sat down, or probably prior to spending $3 billion.
Sure.
And figured out, what are we going to do? What is the best way to get into the streaming business, and what's going to make this work? And then they've spent the last year making it happen, acquiring the talent, mapping out the radio station Beats One, mapping out the deals with the record labels or independent artists, and clearly they've spent a lot of effort in making this work. And I'm kind of excited by it, actually. I'm curious to see where it goes. But I definitely think Apple's in for the long haul on this. I am a little concerned about the Beats radio portion. I don't know if this is going to, how is Beats radio going to work 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now? It may morph, it may change, and maybe that's a good thing. But I'll be real curious to see it launching and then, trying it out. I'm really excited by the 3 months. I think that'll give me an opportunity to see how it really kind of fits into my life. And if it does, I think that's one of the big things that Apple has going for it, and probably why they pushed for 3 months instead of, say, a week or just a month like most other services. A month you may get busy and you may not have a lot of time, but 3 months, it's a really good opportunity to really kind of get your feet wet with it and see if it's something that you're going to use. And if you like, one of the things I really enjoyed at the keynote, being that, they clearly kind of botched some portions of it, but I did like the one demo. I believe it was Eddie Q said, play me the top songs from, March of 1983 or whatever it was. And boom, suddenly it started playing those songs, those groups of songs. That to me was a compelling feature, because that's something that even with my own library, I can't do that. And so if Apple's going to provide that service to me, being able to do that, I think that's really cool. That may be worth $10 a month for me. I don't know yet.
Can I give my opinion on this?
Sure.
Absolutely. No.
Damn. Something that, and I told people 10 years ago that were maybe even longer than that were still had like Blockbuster stock, was to sell it because they were going to go away. I would say the same thing to people that have stock in satellite radio services. It's going to go away. It's going to be replaced by services like Google's and Apple's, and eventually, of course, one from Microsoft and Spotify and Pandora and all of these. And they're going to have, besides the almost generic, well, you like this, this, and this, so here's some of this, where we start getting these custom stations with DJs and all the rest of that. Some will be ad supported, some won't be ad supported. They'll be free with if you're paying, X number of dollars per month, you get these stations for free without ads. And this is really, when you think about it, the future of radio. It's the same kind of thing with podcasting. This is all time shifted content is what's going on right now in both audio and video. It doesn't matter when it was made, or if 20 years ago you had to be sitting in front of your television at 8 o'clock p.m. on a Thursday night to catch your favorite program. It no longer matters, because you can watch that program whenever you want. We're seeing this happen with services tied in with Roku, services tied in with the Fire TV with Amazon. We're seeing it with Apple, with the Apple TV. This is the future. This is what's going on. And companies like Apple, like Google, like so many of these others are leading the way. They're showing us the way it's going to eventually be. And it's just a question of how long can the dinosaurs, like radio stations, and for the most part, a lot of these television stations, record labels, there is so much disruption going on right now in the delivery of content that, you know, if you're involved in content at all, you have to kind of wonder how it's all going to shake out. And a lot of the companies that you see these days, or companies that were popular 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago, have got to be looking over their shoulder and going, what the hell are we going to do? So they're looking for a savior. And whether that savior is going to be services from Apple, whether that savior is going to be services from Google or Microsoft or whoever, they just want someone to tell them what the future is going to be like.
Have I mentioned to you MacVoices Radio, a new streaming service I'm starting?
No, you have not, Chuck. You should probably tell me about that right now.
Because everybody else is doing it. Why shouldn't I do it? Guys, I don't know if we've come to any conclusions, but I feel better. So
Yeah.
I feel like all my stress is gone. But it is something I wanted to try to put a little bit of a balanced spin on it, and I hope it was balanced. I don't know if it was, but I hope it was, or at least maybe gave some folks some things to think about. I do think it proves the old adage that you need to get your news from multiple places, not just one,
Right?
because that's always going to end up biased. Guy, thank you for being here. This is your first time on the MacJury, and we really appreciate having you.
You can hardly get me to shut up sometimes.
Well, we'll have you back again, and I hope you won't shut up then.
Yeah, well, you've heard my podcast, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Okay. Gaz is constantly saying, will you let me finish? Will you let me finish? And it's like, I can't help it. I'm a blonde from Florida.
Julio, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for being here, even if you got here late. We really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, pardon my tardiness, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Nope. Neal, again, always a pleasure. Glad to have you back, and we'll do it again.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
Folks, with that, I think the verdict is in. At least some opinions are in. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.